Good morning and welcome to Race Industry Now, the weekly webinar series from JR Twedt, brought to you by ARP, Performance Plus Global Logistics, Ferrea, Peak, Quire, and Fifth Third Bank Motorsports. I am Francisco Savignan, the founder and CEO of JR Twedt, the racing industry, every minute, every day. This is episode 462, and we're going to be talking with K1 RaceGear and Freem. With me this morning are Judy King, the co-founder of JR Twedt, and a wonderful host, the one and only Mr. Jeff Hammond. Judy?
Thank you, Francis, and thank you everyone for joining. I'm proud to have K1 RaceGear on again today. We've had them on before, but I remember when they stepped into the PRI show 15 years ago, 20 years ago. It's been wonderful to watch them bloom and just grow. Part of the reason, I know they're a full team, there is this gentleman, JR, that's joining us today. He is very integral in making that company grow, and you see him out there just heading at the tracks and making things happen. So welcome with us, JR. Jeff?
Well, thank you very much, Judy. And yes, good morning, JR. I hope you're doing well. And I'm equally excited about having these folks on because I had an opportunity to pick JR's brain just a little earlier today. And I think what he's getting ready to share with us, hopefully a lot of people will take to heart. And the overall industry around not only the United States, but hopefully worldwide will listen and we can save some people. And, JR, you know what I'm talking about. So I think you got a little piece for us to kind of like look at. So why don't you get the ball rolling?
Yeah, good morning, guys. How are you?
Well, like I say, just really excited about having you on. And the thing is, your company and for what you guys stand for has always been impressive. But to me, what we're getting ready to bring today is even going to be one step, I think, further down the road of safety and how to protect and make sure that everybody who goes to a race comes home from a race safely.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Industry changing, speeding up all the time. We've got to take time to educate. And, you only get a couple times a year to get in front of those people and have these platforms. JR Twedt certainly one of the most effective at that. But it's nice to be able to take some time and educate and talk about some specifics in the industry that don't get talked about, and that's what we've been focusing on lately is education.
Well, I think you got a little, before we start the educational process, don't you have a little bit of a clip you'd like to show us about where K1 is?
Yeah, I think we had a video to roll there and just a little introduction.
The fastest growing name in the motorsports industry is the Racers brand of safety gear and apparel. Winners wear K1.
I'd say you got a lot of your bases covered there, bud.
Well, nothing quite like kicking it off with our three-time Knoxville Nationals champion, NASCAR Cup champion Kyle Larson, and showing how fast the brand's been growing. And yeah, it's just a little introduction to show where we're at and how quickly we're growing. But we've got there by consistently being very technical about what we're doing and taking opportunities like this to educate people just beyond the 30,000 foot view of, all these guys are wearing it, but why? So it's really important that we talk about things like that and get some education out there.
Well, as you were sharing with me earlier, you're not just looking at the glitz and the glamour. All right. The Kyle Larsons, Compton, Crafton. These guys are recognizable. And again, they're great representation of your company. But you take when you go to a racetrack, you're not just looking at the drivers. You're not just looking at the crews. You're looking at a lot of other people who are involved at racetracks day in and day out around the country, around the world. And I love your approach right now of what you're offering for a lot of these track promoters and people who are safety conscious. You guys have got a program for them.
Yeah, we got multiple programs for the track safety workers, big facilities and your Saturday night facilities. And I think that, what we were talking about earlier was, where we see areas that we can improve not only our product, but again, I keep using the word education, is that, there's a lack of it. And that's not necessarily the fault of track owners, promoters, or, everybody's got to do their due diligence, but we have to put it out there as well. And we could sit here and talk for hours about the technical aspects, and that doesn't necessarily educate people. There's a couple of things that I've seen across the world, and the number of racetracks that we go to and the people that we associate with, is that, oftentimes these track safety workers, they're volunteers, and it's not to say that they're not educated in what they're doing. They certainly are. Most of them are very, very passionate. They have a harrowing job, and they're the last line of defense in some of those areas that we don't like to talk about, the not if but when. And they need to feel their confidence that they can do their job. There's two questions that we have often to them, and where they seem to be the least educated, and that is the two areas. The first one being, what is it that I'm wearing? Most of these people, they've got a director or manager or somebody that runs operations for the safety side of things, whether it's a big track or a small track. They get handed a fire suit, balaclava, a helmet, and boots and some gloves, and they're trained in their job, but they're not necessarily trained in, what did I just put on? What are the inherent risks, right? We think about fire, right? It's almost the first thing that always pops up is fire. Fire's bad, okay, in almost any situation. Now, what is that fire doing? Okay, most guys think, well, I mean, burned by the fire. In a sense, what they don't talk about is the danger of indirect flames and the exposure that causes the most harm, and that's usually heat transfer. Almost always, it's an indirect heat exposure that can lead to really severe injuries without direct contact to the fire. And when you say that to somebody, that I didn't think about that, right? And okay, so how do we protect against that? And really, in our side of things, it's about layering, and it's about the construction of the suits that they're wearing. Almost always, when you go to a racetrack, whether I've seen it on the high level racetracks and FIA sanctioning bodies, as well as the SFI tracks, Saturday nights, or even the big tracks, is a lot of these guys, I can tell right away, their program is not been educated. And it could be that they're wearing K1, and I'm like, that's just the wrong K1, right? Is that they're not layered correctly, or they don't have the specific material that should be functioning to what they're going to be exposed to. For instance, there's two basic trains of thought or layering and construction of suits. Okay, you've got aramidtic fibers, which is Nomex. Nomex is a word that people hear out there all the time, which is an inherent fire resistant material. Okay, it's manufactured, and you can't wash this out. It's far more flame resistant, and it's untreated. So those materials are obviously the highest level of protection, and they're what we would like to see almost everybody in. Most of these track workers, though, are using some sort of an FR treated cotton suit. SFI 1, they say, well, it meets SFI standard. Great, but what is your exposure to that, and what are you getting protected against? Over time, FR treated cotton material, you can wash it off. It gets degraded from the sunlight and UV, gets materials into it that's not being prepared or not being taken care of well enough. And you're basically wearing a cotton suit at that point that doesn't have very much protection. On top of that, that suit's not quilted. Yeah. Just a small little technical, without getting way too techie on this, is that quilting is one of the most important parts in any part of the construction of the suit. And when we talk about quilting, and I'll just grab a suit here real quick we're talking about how the inner and outer layers are stitched together. Okay, you've got an outer layer of woven material, and you got an inner layer that's usually a knitted Nomex fiber. But what we're talking about is the quilting and the section and the spacing in between that, and how it's constructed together. Quilting is important holding the suits together, no doubt, but it's also the layers are, you have an air gap in between there, and that air gap is vital in protection against heat transfer. Okay, so when you're wearing a single layer, and a lot of times you're wearing a single layer without any Nomex underwear, again, a big no-no, like to see everybody in Nomex underwear, is that you're not getting that protection against that heat transfer. Again, we go back to talk about, well, is the fire burning you? No, the heat transfer is generally what's going to burn somebody. So having that quilting properly layered and properly spaced to give that amount of air gap is vital. Again, you're not going to get that out of a single layer FR cotton suit. You're only going to get that out of a Nomex 2 or 3 layer multi-layer suits. We generally like to see people in 3 layers because it gives an added protection plus an air gap and barrier in between that heat transfer. So that technical side of things is something that we really like to push out there because almost nobody understands that side of it, and it's not their fault. They just haven't been educated on it. They're usually looking for lightweight and breathable, and the thought is, well, I've got a single layer suit, that's got to be lighter. FR cotton suits are always heavier than Nomex. They're nowhere near as flexible. So that's another misnomer, is that, well, I've got a single layer suit, it's got to be lighter. Absolutely not. In almost every case, they're going to be heavier, because you have to be heavier to get the same level of protection that you would get out of a multi-layered Nomex suit. Makes sense when you think about it that way. So what it really boils down to in that education and the programs usually is cost. So single layer FR cotton suits, they're always going to be more cost effective because they're cheaper to make. Obviously, the treatment, the material itself is nowhere near as expensive as what Nomex is. These guys often have a budget, but I think that education combined with that budget in mind, you could start getting these more programs and more racing organizations and more racetracks to start understanding that maybe we have to up the budget, or maybe we have to change our train of thought on this and go, well, we're not actually investing well in this program because these single layer suits are not protecting the guys that need to protect the drivers and teams.
The thing that gets me about what you just described is, and I hate to say it like this, is some people cutting corners, but thinking that they're smarter than the industry, you might say. And I'm talking about your industry and understanding what they're getting into. The other thing that always worries me is that when I've run different short tracks throughout my entire career, sometimes, with cup drivers, you go somewhere for the weekend or go for a Friday night or a Saturday night to have some fun. And you see some of the safety crews, and you always a little bit, I have always been leery about what they're wearing. And I don't think they understand. And you make very valid points. It's not just fire. You go up inside and get close to a sprint car, for example. The exhausts, the headers, I mean, they can burn you just as quick as a flame can burn you. Hot oil, I mean, what kind of, protection do you have, from that? And brake rotors, I mean, depending on how much, where you are on what short tracks, I mean, it may not be glowing red, but it doesn't mean it won't brand you for life. So, I mean, just hearing you talk about that, if I'm a race director, I need to make a list of this. And, while we're on that subject of a list, does your company have like an outline, like if I want to start and develop and improve my safety program that I could follow and adhere to, and then I could work with your group to be able to better my team and keep them better protected?
Yes, absolutely. The programs are quite different. We're after the same thing. We're trying to protect. We're trying to protect the driver, trying to protect the race teams, the over the wall guys, and the safety group. And a lot of times the safety workers there, they to allude to what you're saying, they get that, I don't want to say taken for granted, but they sort of do, is that they're like, well, they're not in the action, all the time. Well, but when they are, it's generally in a very, very precarious situation, and it's almost oftentimes far more extreme than what the driver and the over the wall guys are experiencing. So having that knowledge is key. Now, we got a lot of programs that people can read about and the differences, and they can certainly get education from this. The best thing is to call and talk to an educated manufacturer and their staff. My staff is highly trained. They're the best in the industry. I mean, from all corners of the world and racing world, they know exactly how to. One of the first questions that almost my staff asks everybody when they call, email is, "What are you doing? You know, what kind of racing are you doing? What is your role, right?" And then we can develop and educate them on the programs that we have. And really, to go back just a little bit, Jeff, but this kind of plays into it, is the second thing that is the most uneducated part. And the reason you want to call and talk about these programs and everything is the care for your suits. This is something that's overlooked tremendously, and especially by track workers, because they get done at the end of the night. They usually take this thing off. They're not as lucky as a NASCAR driver these days. It's got a handler and a media guy and or a girl and somebody to grab their
You mean a
stuff.
valet?
Whatever you want to call them, babysitter, we can say. They don't have these things, and they're often left up to their own devices to care for their product. Now, you also got big racetracks, whether it's SMI's group or any of those. They do a fantastic job, but they've also been educated. We hold some stuff with Tommy Williams and the guys over there, and we talk about the educating their people and how to care for something. Okay. Wash care and what you're wearing and how it reacts to how it's being cared for is so vital, especially in heat transfer. So you talked about, fluid, oil, all these things that are going to get on somebody, dry, speed dry, solvents, things like that. All of these things are conductive for heat and heat transfer. Okay. If you've got a suit that's perfectly clean and cared for, it's going to last a lot longer, but it's also going to have a higher level of protection versus one that's got oil and dirt and grease all over it, or solvents or fuel that's sitting on it. Those are conductive. They're going to conduct more heat transfer to the drive or the crew members. So care, how do we care for them? Again, you go back to these single layer suits that have an FR treatment to them. Yes, they're going to do their job, providing that they're being taken care of. How do you take care of these things? Cold water wash them inside out. Secure all the closures on them. You've got Velcro closures, the hook and loops, you've got zippers that need to be taken care of, logos, all these kind of things. You want to make sure that these things, logos, take, for example, you get a logo on there and it gets dirt and solvent stuff all over it, and you don't wash and treat that suit often enough. Again, you got a hot spot in that suit, essentially. So caring for these things, mild detergents, they're fireproof, Jeff. They're not bulletproof. Okay. They're actually a rather delicate material. So you need to treat them as such and treat them with care. Mild detergents, avoid bleach and solvents and things like that. Moderate temperatures when you're drying. We almost always recommend inside out, wash them in a cold water or a mild temperature with nothing aggressive as far as detergent goes. Molecules, a great brand that makes a cleaning detergent that's specifically designed for Nomex. Wash them inside out, secure all your hook and loop, your zippers and everything like that, and then hang dry it outside of the sun. You wouldn't imagine the amount of dirt tracks, especially that I go to, and you look down at all these multi-million-dollar haulers and these great operations, and you got an old, you got a hang line that people are hanging their suits out to dry in the sunshine. UV and UV rays will absolutely destroy suits. Okay. When you see, you've known from as many suits as you've worn over you get these little balls that are all over the suit. That is degrading the Nomex itself. And this will happen with Nomex or with FR cotton, is that is generally caused by something that is aggressively, deteriorating.
Breaking it down.
It's breaking it down. UV is almost the worst thing. Okay. So, and especially if you have colored suits, something that's not the standard black, white, and reds, those things are going to go, and you can see it. So this is kind of gives you that, like, if you're seeing these things in your suit, again, you're not educated yet. You need to go use a little common sense. Go, why is this happening? Probably because you're not treating the suit. Oftentimes it gets blamed on the manufacturer. Oh, I bought this suit and it fell apart. Almost always it comes down to maintenance. So maintenance is a very, very important thing to talk about in here. And it's something that there's a lack of education on. It's like, well, I'm done with my job today. I go throw it over in the wash and hang dry this thing, or throw it in a tumble dry, and then it starts to deteriorate. This is what we want to avoid. So yes, to go back to your question, call. I mean, call, email, write, ask us
Right.
about these programs, ask us about, tell us what you're doing, and we can guide you the best and put you in the best program. But do yourself a favor and ask. I mean, it's just because you understand how to do your job doesn't often always mean that you understand the things you're using to do your job and how they function. And that's not your fault. Get some education on it.
Well, there's a couple of things I'm hearing here, but there's two things I want to ask you about. Number one, you never mentioned dry cleaning fire suit. And number two, the age of a fire suit. When does it possibly lose its ability to protect you? And I'd like to know a little bit more about that, because I mean, back in the day, we were always big on getting our stuff to the dry cleaners. Well, the evolution in the very beginning was race day suits, especially for pit crews. We still weren't fireproof, so yeah, we dry cleaned them things so everybody looked good, especially back in days of Budweiser and everything like that. We wanted to look sharp, tied, wash everything tied. Okay. But there's a certain,
well, you guys had a reason for that with old DW.
Yeah.
You got to support that sponsor too.
Exactly. But still, to be able to protect him, we got to be smart. And I don't think we were being educated at that time, because when I was finally had somebody explain to me what a dry cleaning process does to a fire suit or anything that's, fire retardant, what you're doing, you're taking it right out of there and breaking it down. And the age on it, how much faster a fire suit becomes not as good when you do these things.
Yeah. So to talk about longevity briefly here is that, again, it goes back to what type of suit are you wearing? If you're wearing a treated suit, okay, the more you wear it, the more you abuse it, the more you wash it, the value of your protection goes away. The chemicals and the treatment that's on the suit is going to degrade over time with UV, with washes, and with wear and tear. Okay. Now, you're generally going to see, if even with the best care on a FR fire resistant treated cotton suit, about 20 to 25 washes is going to be the max life of that. Now, think about it for a second. If you're wearing that and you're at a facility that runs a 40 to 50 weeks schedule and a couple of races a week or something, you're going to have to buy a couple of suits. If you're doing it properly, you'd have to wear 2 to 3 suits throughout the year to give yourself the ultimate protection. The cost effectiveness just goes out the window when you talk about FR treatment versus Nomex at that point. Okay. Now, from the multi-layer suits and level 5 suits, you would say with SFI or something that's Nomex and double or 3-layer, you certainly have more time, but it doesn't mean that the care is not just as critical. Now, you're not going to wash out the inherent value of a Nomex suit. Okay. It's not going to wash away, but it will deteriorate based on how well you maintain it. Okay. It's not going to go to the level of a fire resistant cotton, but it's certainly going to pill and start to peel away. Those things are going to bring the value down, the TPP protection, your thermal barrier of that suit, the more it degrades. So, they say the industry standard, people talk about 5 years on a suit. You almost never see that anymore. I mean, you're talking about, drivers at the professional level. Obviously, if we want to go back to those guys being pampered the way they are, I mean, they're often 8 to 12 suits a year that they've got based on their sponsorship agreements, or just having multiple suits that they can change in and out of. That's not ideal for your track workers or for your Saturday night guys, right?
Right.
So they need to be more aware and specific about how they maintain their suits and how long they have. I don't like to tell them that 5 years. I get that everybody's on a budget and safety gear is not always at the top of that priority. I wish it was. But I say, 2 to 3 years, you really need to be looking at your maintenance program, making sure that those suits are standing up to what they're not going to look like when they're brand new, but making sure you don't have any holes in the knitted sections. I see a lot of guys all the time, great looking suit. You see the backstretch panels or the gussets underarm, and they got holes in them. Well, you don't need to be a scientist of any industry to understand that that's not going to protect you. Now, you're going to get burned by fire and certainly heat transfer at that point. Inspect regularly. I mean, if you're pulling your suit out every day, it doesn't take but a couple of seconds to start looking at the materials and looking at spots that may be deteriorating in the knit, right? And the knit is functional, right? But it's got to be, you can't have, even if it's still got its value of stretch and elasticity to it, it can't have holes in it. You know, it can't be frayed. That starts to happen. You need to start looking at that and talk to the manufacturer. I mean, we have a program at K1 where, you know, within 6 months you're under warranty, but even if you're a year or two into that thing and you're like, man, I can't afford to replace a, you know, a couple $1,000 suit, that's okay. Send the thing to us. We got a good program and a cost-effective program to replace all the cuffs on it, zippers, knit and gut suit. You don't have to spend all that kind of money to buy a brand new suit if you don't need to, but you do need to do your due diligence and inspect your stuff.
Yeah, it's get ahead of it before it gets you.
100%.
Real quick, you know, folks, we have the opportunity for you to ask JR questions. So don't forget, you know, we're here for you. And Eric Hahn, he wanted to know, is fire and heat hazard for drivers the same as fire and heat hazard for rescue workers? Should they wear the same gear? Should rescue workers have something different? I mean, you're kind of answering that question as we go along, but I want to make sure that we got it out there that we do have the ability to ask questions for you or to you, and we'd like to get them to join in with us.
Yeah, it's a good question. And you know, it's situational, Eric and Jeff, is, you know, a driver's sitting in a cockpit most of the time, right? And even the suits that drivers wear, this again goes back to why I train my staff and my people are trained to ask questions about what you're doing. The suit that I'm putting, if I was to put Kyle Larson in for let's just use him for example, in his sprint car, is going to be a little bit different than what he's going to wear in a cup car or in a sports car. Why? Okay, it's not that nobody's trying to be cheaper about you know, what somebody's wearing or especially not Kyle, but what is the situation that he's in on a Saturday night in a sprint car? Okay, you got a fuel cell sitting right behind you in the seat. Okay, you're in a little cockpit in a 1,400-pound car, which Jeff, you've been around racing a long time, and most people have. Sprint cars leak. Okay, they got oil leaks, they've got fuel leaks almost all the time. Most drivers get out after a 25, 30 lap main event, and a lot of them have fuel down on the bottom of their legs. Okay. It only takes a rock chip to light methanol and for that thing to start burning, and you won't see it. We try to educate drivers based on the situation that they're in. That goes to crew members as well. Now, I recommend multi-layer Nomex suits for anything. Okay. It's not always ideal, and we have options for that as long as you're educated about what you're doing. But to ask, is a safety gear, fire is fire, okay? And heat transfer is heat transfer. Yeah. You need to be protected no matter what the job is that you're doing. Oftentimes, it comes down to budget, okay? There's a lot of materials and textiles that are available to where we can build ultralight 2 and 3 layer suits. And most of the time, that budget's not available to track and safety workers. So they're going to end up in a material in a layer that's going to be much heavier. Is it better? Is it worse? Protection is the ultimate thing here. So to get to your level of protection, for example, SFI focuses a lot on heat transfer and TPP, which is a thermal protection. They use this number out there to avoid second-degree burns, which is your TPP rating. In a 2-layer suit, you're often going to see that value is somewhere between 14 and 16. You divide that in half. That's going to be the number of seconds that you can be on fire before you sustain a second-degree burn from fire from heat transfer. So if you take 15, 14, you know, value, you're going to be 7 seconds of protection. And a single-layer suit has about half that value, right? So you're talking about 3 to 4 seconds. Now, you can give yourself some added insurance by wearing protective underwear. Always a good thing to educate yourself on there. Buying the right underwear, making sure it's not too loose. It's also not too tight. What is the fibers that it's made out of? How much protection does that one layer of protective material against your skin? You know, there's fancy words out there about moisture wicking and all this stuff that was used for you know, the athletes in the NBA and in baseball and football. That's not we're not talking about the same kind of garments here. Okay. So that's that's something you need to educate yourself on and talk to trusted manufacturers. So I think to answer Eric's question, really it's about situations, but ultimately we're trying to give the same level of protection. And to do that, the blanket statement I'd try to use for everybody would be use a multi-layer aramidtic Nomex suit. Almost always. Okay. That's going to give you the same inherent values that a driver would have and a pit crew guy. But oftentimes I would err on the side of caution with safety workers and say it best to have a heavier, thicker, more aramidtic suit than a driver would, because the situations you're often going to find yourself in are going to be you're going to be in the fire. You're going to be pulling drivers out. You're going to be working with fuel and spillage and oils and solvents that the driver is not experiencing, hopefully. So yes, Nomex and multi-layer suits, they're going to be the same as far as their description. Their values are going to change based on the textile that's being used. But in a vacuum, in a nutshell, they are very similar.
Well, I mean, it's just like we haven't even touched on the fact that, drag racers, anybody watches a drag racer start, suiting up. I mean, it's just, they can't get enough layers on them to a certain degree. And understandably, because you basically riding along and all of a sudden you might have a fireball in your face. So, you need to make sure no holes and definitely as much protection as you possibly can get.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And again, harp on this, or being repetitive here, is the situation, or what is it that you're doing, what kind of racing. I mean, in a fuel car, especially, a top fuel car, the added layers are for a number of reasons. That you're wearing 6 and 7 layers to a higher standard that SFI or FIA sets, is because that environment is almost always going to have something catastrophic happen. Now, we don't wish that. I know that's an exciting part of it, but it's certainly not what the drivers, teams, or even us professionals want to see. But we're prepared for it with the options that we have and programs that we have for those people. So again, those are Nomex suits, but they're layered differently. They're built differently. They're certainly more heavy, but they're in an environment where nitromethane is something that's almost impossible to light without a mag, and then once it's lit, it's almost impossible to get out. I mean, it's very tough. So your suit has to be able to withstand that. And going off on drag racing, you brought it up there, is like the amount of clutch dust that gets on these things and fuel that gets on your suits. You can have a brand new suit, and after one run, that suit's going to look like it's 3 or 4 years old. Those guys really have to maintain their suits. They really have to hold those to a higher standard.
One other thing along the same lines that a lot of guys are going to are the cool shirts. How does that factor in to safety with the drivers? I mean, do they need to do something extra? Is that thing? I mean, I'm sure it's not flammable, but you know where I'm coming from. How does that come into your protection?
Yeah. So great question, because this also comes down to, the conversation we talked about is environment, functionality, and what is the inherent risk of it. Now, these suits now or these cool shirts now are especially at NASCAR level, they're all wearing these RINI suits, RINI. It's a coolant that's circulated through the shirt that's on the skin layer, okay? And it's surrounded by Nomex fibers, aramidtic fibers, okay? That's plugged into the side of the suit, where we have a hole that we cut in the suit that's also secured by a hook and loop, so that it's got exposure to that. So now people go, well, JR, you just said that if a liquid was on something and it gets hot, you're getting more heat transfer. You're not wrong. I did say that, but you're also talking about the layer in which that coolant is running through. Okay, you're running this along the skin layer. You're not talking about the external woven layer where this thing's wet and then that heat transfer is coming through. Keeping the body cool is also a really great thing, because what we haven't talked about is sweat and how that sweat permeates and perforates the layers of the suit. Once a suit is wet and soggy if you're in a fire, it doesn't matter if it's water or fuel that's on it, it's going to conduct heat at that layer where it is wet. That layer inside that's on your skin while it's vital to protect and give you that extra layer of protection against the outer two, circulating the coolness through that thing is certainly a benefit to drivers. So no, they're made out of Nomex almost always. If it's not, don't use it, in my opinion. Make sure that you buy one that's certified from SFI or from the FIA, and you've got a layer of protection there, and they are suitable to wear.
Changing gears just a little bit here, Eric Gunderson would like to know, you're also the head of Freem. How does that acquisition further the future of K1 RaceGear to educate and enhance the product of that your team produces?
Yeah, good. So yeah, we had touched on that a little bit, is that, we acquired a partnership with Freem out of Italy. You're talking about a level of manufacturing and consistency that's probably at the very top, in my opinion, and we've got the data to back that up, the highest level of driver suits and equipment that you can use. Zero compromise, just a world leader in quality and design. It gives us the opportunity to expand our offerings into different markets. Again, we talk about situational stuff. Every race car sanctioning body is different, and every racing series is different in how they function, the speeds that they operate at. That transfers into the products that you have available, whether it's a low-level, entry-level FR cotton suit, whether it's a 2-layer or multi-layer, as we'd say, Nomex suit, or whether it's a suit that's worn in F1 or IMSA or WEC. Again, they all have the same inherent values if they're constructed correctly, but the level of construction that we put into these suits, there are different levels. Let me say this to what Eric was saying too. I appreciate the question and statement there, is that we've also partnered with this company to make ourselves better. We've manufactured to a level, certainly for a very long time now. We're going on 25 years in business, and certainly the last 10 or 12, we've elevated our game tremendously. This investment was really to be able to give us that ability to not only offer that to drivers and teams, but offer it to our manufacturing capabilities as well. We've invested heavily on our side of it, and now we've invested in this partnership to give us the education and training to be at a higher level. So it's really a major change for our company, but it's going to affect the industry as well, because we have the ability to manufacture any suit to the highest level without compromise consistently now.
You talk about manufacturing. That makes me think about when I've seen Kyle Larson's suit, and think back to DW back in the day when he had his famed chrome suit that they made. How challenging is it for your company with the ability of a lot of these sponsors and art directors? They come up with these uniforms that they want all this stuff on. And there's restrictions and constraints, and there's safety regulations that need to be adhered to. How challenging is that when you're trying to work with people who think, well, I can do what I want to do, and you need to make it for me? Where do you draw the line?
How long do we have here, Jeff? All right. Well, let me say without joking, everything's a challenge in this industry, right? I tell my people all the time, we don't use the word problems around here. We use the word challenge. Challenge is something that we like to take on. Problems are something that they pass off on the boss. So I don't like problems. I like challenges. The challenge is great, but we understand it, right? We go back to basics here. What do we say all the time in Victory Lane, and what do we say to anybody in an interview? I can't do this without my sponsors. We take that as serious as the drivers do. Okay. A sponsor's likeness is something that we put a tremendous amount of time in to make sure that they are represented well on this walking billboard that is out in front of everybody. Okay. Where the challenge comes is that we don't overstep functionality for style. Okay. And that's something.
Glamour.
Well, yeah, and it's something that's become a bit of an issue. I think it's a lot better now, especially because SFI and NASCAR got together on their printed and embroidery and graphics that go on these suits. There's a level now that's in that SFI has with NASCAR that's instead of a 3.2A5, which is the layers of the suit that we test to, there's a 3.4 spec now for NASCAR, and that is something that the FIA had done for years with embroidery, but now with most of these suits at that level being printed, you know, the print needs to be as fire resistant as anything. Keep going back to it. What is heat transfer? How does it work? You know, if you have something that's just a heat transfer logo, you know, something that you would put on a you know, a t-shirt, which is something people were doing for a very long time, is just heat pressing logos onto a suit. When that thing gets hot and it boils and it falls down on the driver's leg, you know, and he's driving along and it was in a fire, that is a hot spot on that suit now. It needs to be fire resistant. So NASCAR, understandably, the reason they did it, and I applaud them and SFI for doing it, is they created a new program where the graphics have to be individually tested beyond the suit. So when you test the suit, you test it to the same level as a 3.2A5 suit. But if you're going to run that suit in NASCAR, you have to have the graphics tested as well. That's great. So what does that do in the overall challenge of design from art directors and teams and what they do? You know, we do have some say and we do have some education that we give even to the top level teams. I mean, Jeff, if you saw some of the stuff that they propose, a lot of times we have to go, guys, no, this is not going to function anymore. The driver is going to be uncomfortable. This is going to create issues with quilting that we talked about earlier and the spacing and things. So yes, it definitely is a challenge, something that we are really, really good at, because for a long time, we've probably been one of the larger custom suit manufacturers in the world. We do, you know, that's where we started, was in custom suits, and we learned a lot from that. And we've been able to we've been able to use those manufacturing abilities now to know, guys, this is not going to work well. Okay. And we need to educate you on that. So the challenge is education. It just like we started off with, but it's educating even the highest level teams. People have been doing it a long time. I mean, I've told Kyle no on a few things that have been proposed to us. It's like, you're not going to be.
You would tell Kyle Larson no?
I don't have a problem with it. He's usually pretty. He's actually really easy. But you know, it can't just be about comfort and style. You know, I want you comfortable, but don't shoot yourself in the foot by going, we want to give our sponsors this. I understand that, and we want to help. But you got to be educated and you got to use some common sense about how this works. And so, yes, style's great. Likeness is great. Sponsorship visibility is tremendous. It's what drives our sport. You got to be smart about it, though. We can't.
I'm gonna say one of the questions we have right here. Hopefully, we can kind of help put a period on this here. Eric wanted to know: can you talk about how to identify a cheap suit? I saw a lot of new imported fire suit vendors at PRI last year. Are all SFI rated suits created equal?
No, absolutely not. And I won't, you know, it's a good question.
I know we're putting you on the spot here, but I mean,
no, I'm fine with being put on the spot, because it is an issue in the industry, right? And it's something that I can't police. And there's only so many times that we can sound the alarm with the sanctioning bodies and say, hey, this is just not good for the sport. It's not good for the unfortunate part is that there's not a level of policing that there should be. And that's not to the fault of SFI or FIA, because that's a very daunting task. You've got a number of manufacturers that come into this industry and they have, and to say they're imported, I mean, almost every suit and textile is imported to this point. Identifying, which is really a great question from Eric, because this, again, education.
Right.
You can certainly spot the differences. And if he was at PRI and he noticed it, then he knows how to spot a cheap suit. Or, you know, cheap is probably not the best word to say, because I mean, heck, anymore, some of that stuff is very expensive. Noticing the textiles and the differences is something that you can do if you're educated on what you're looking for. Location of things like logos, you know, I mean, you'll see things where, you know, you have logos that are printed or embroidered all over the place, and you're like, A really high level professional would not do something like that. Locations of the SFI tags. Look at the SFI tag on the thing. There's companies that have made them. I mean, I'll go ahead and say it. I mean, there's people that have done it before, and instead of purchasing from the SFI, which means, a lot of these companies that come in too, they don't own their own manufacturing facilities, so they go in there trying to trust these manufacturers who just happen to have Nomex and can layer suits. But like, look at the distance in the quilting. Is it really super narrow? Because if it is, it's not built right. Does it have gussets all over the place? They go, oh, we want all these gussets on these suits with this knitted area, so it's got more functionality to it. Well, no, it doesn't. I mean, the knitted Nomex is always going to have less of a fire protection than the woven Nomex does on the exterior. If you got a whole suit that's got gussets all over it, think about it.
You're
right?
in trouble.
Yeah. So there's little things that you can, but it's a great question, Eric, and it's part of a really, really long conversation. And I'm happy to have it with people if they want to call and email and let us know, or meet us at a trade show, and I will show you the difference. I have no problem with it. There's no shame in telling it, because it needs to be called out and needs to be called out more.
Well, I mean, I'm glad to hear you say that, because again, it's all about safety. And again, your company is stepping up saying, hey, we're willing to help if you raise your hand. You call us, we'll talk to you about safety around your racetrack. And if you're a local short track driver and you want a cool suit, we'll help you design something, come up with something, and we'll educate you on the things like you talked about today, Nomex versus this. Yep. And at the same time, how much is your life worth? I mean, and when I say life, it don't mean you got to die, but I don't know about you. I've seen people who've been burnt before all this came along. And if they had a chance to do it over, they would have done it different, because we know better. I mean, this is the sad part about it. Your company and a lot of other companies that are in the safety business know why this needs to be done the right way.
Well, it's like being a parent, Jeff. It takes a village, right? And we kind of all got to work together. Manufacturers as well. I think it's important that companies like ourselves and Sparco and OMP and Alpine Star, we all maintain a level of professionalism and test to the highest levels, and educate our customers, even if they're not our customers. Education as a whole is not going to hurt anybody to put more in your brain. I mean, it's really vital to what we're doing here. But you got to know, where are you getting that education from? Who are the trusted resources you're getting it from? And those are great questions. Like Eric just said, is like, how do I know? Well, the first thing I would say is, and here's another thing I would like to just put out there, is a lot of the sales of fire suits, especially standard fire suits, gloves, shoes, underwear, things like that, they come from retailers or wholesalers, right? You're not dealing directly with the manufacturer. You're dealing oftentimes with a trusted distributor. Those guys need to be educated as well. What you often hear in the marketing side of things is lightweight. Lightweight's almost the first thing somebody goes to. Great, lightweight's good. To what end, right? If some manufacturer, if some retailer or wholesaler can't give you any more data behind lightweight and comfort, I would be like, okay, let me find some more information on that. And if you can't find that information on that manufacturer's website that is specific to that suit that they're calling lightweight and comfortable, that would be one of your first key indicators that something's off here, right? So I would encourage people, educate yourself, listen to trusted manufacturers. How long have they been in business? Who's wearing their stuff, right? I mean, really, if you go, oh, well, Kyle Larson wears K1 and Chase Elliott wears Alpine Star. Great. Why do they do it? These are trusted manufacturers who they put their lives in their hands. That's added insurance, and they trust us. There's a reason they trust us. We've been doing things the right way for a very long time. We have every standard that's out there on our suits and our equipment, and they've educated themselves. Do the same thing.
Well, thank you very much for all the information and for sharing and letting people know that K1 cares, and all you got to do is pick up the phone and call, and you'll prove it to them. And I'm like I said, I hope people will listen and will heed what you just shared with us, because you never know. The next big fire, you may be right in the middle of it, whether you're a driver or a safety worker. So you better think about it like that. Do you want to be walking around with scars for the rest of your life if you're lucky you don't get killed?
Well, let me just say, exiting this thing, thank you guys. But safety workers, track workers, I know I wanted to spend some time on that. You are every bit as valued in this industry as race car drivers are for their entertainment and what they do. And without you, it does not work. You know, these guys really do need to rely on you. So do yourself a favor, educate yourself further about what you are wearing, the functionality of it, and how it works and how to care for it. It's so important.
Well, like I said, thank you very much for joining us here. Francis, Judy, I think it pretty much sums it up.
Thank you, JR. Thank you. Great job as always. And thank you for all your expertise and sharing, your knowledge with us. This webinar has been recorded. It will be posted later on the ePortrait platform, distributed through our newsletter and social media channel. In the meantime, we pushed K1's product back on the homepage of ePortrait. So for more information and update, visit ePortrait.com. Next webinar will be with Quara. Again, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
ePortrait is a digital platform that we've created basically to make life easier in the business community of auto racing.
ePortrait, there is no e-commerce. It's literally a connection just like at a trade show. So now, any time of the year, a buyer could reach out to a supplier.
When you see a product that you're interested in, all you need to do is click on request more information, and then from there, it is forwarded directly to the buyer or to the supplier.
ePortrait really eliminates having to travel, closing down your shop. Now you have a place to showcase globally your racing product and technology.
Land speed record holder George Poteet's Speed Demon rocketed 481 miles per hour at the Bonneville Salt Flats. You don't go that fast without ARP fasteners.
There is no way that we could go the speed that we've gone, the number of times we've gone, with a lesser quality bolt than ARP supplies to us. And we absolutely wouldn't be where we were today if it weren't for ARP.
When failure is not an option, it's ARP-bolts.com.
We're Performance Plus Global Logistics. Our team of dedicated performance industry and logistics experts get valuable cars and components to the track on time in top condition. We provide expedited logistics solutions for the performance industry using direct routes instead of deferred options, and communicate all necessary information to the appropriate resources to meet regulations and ensure a smooth transit and secure delivery, both domestically and internationally. And we exceed customer expectations by providing best-in-class service with an efficient and cost-effective system in place. Contact us today to book your next shipment.
You work as hard as your truck, and you have no time for downtime. That's why more truck owners trust Blue Def, America's #1 diesel exhaust fluid brand. Each batch is guaranteed pure, so you can avoid costly repairs caused by inferior DEF. Demand America's best for your truck. Blue Def and Blue Def Platinum. Put trust in your truck.
With roots in the Midwest that date back well before the Model T, Fifth Third Bank has a long history of serving the needs of automotive companies. While much has changed over the years, our passion for helping businesses put cars on the road and on the track has not. Today, we are more committed than ever as a member of SEMA, a founding member of PRI, and a sponsor of multiple race teams across several racing series.
For over a decade, Fifth Third Bank has been a staunch supporter of our industry and a great partner for many companies in the motorsports field.
Our business has been growing extremely fast, and really we could not be where we are today without Fifth Third. They provided amazing strategic advice, the capital we need to support our phases of growth.
They are true partners for me now, and what they do with their involvement in motorsports is untouched in this community.
Where can we take your business? Fifth Third Bank.
Where will you find Ferrea racing components? Circle track, drag racing, and any top race shop. In every form of motorsports competition, our valves and valve train components deliver race-proven design and technology. And we've brought that same performance to our street applications as well. We're backed by 5 decades of experience, an extensive range of off-the-shelf components, and our custom valve department has the fastest turnaround times in the industry. Ferrea Racing Components. Stand with us or race against us.
When it comes to pushing the limits of performance, the pros know there's no room for compromise. At Crower Cams, we don't just engineer camshafts and valve train components, we redefine what power means. Since 1955, Crower Cams has been the name trusted by racers, engine builders, and gearheads around the globe. Whether you're building a street machine, a dragster, or a track car, Crower Cams provides the muscle you need to dominate. And with Crower, victory is within your reach.